It was like
Insurance.
hard, yeah. Yeah, it looked cool, and I was like, like it's now, so it's like. So efficient.
Right.
It's like insurance.
Thanks.
Hello, Trustee Robinson. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Awesome, we can hear you.
Perfect. Yes. I don't. Just trustee. Goals usually.
It's a problem.
Hello?
Because there's like a lot of this things that it's like.
Yeah, oh, okay. Just so you know. Yeah, no problem.
Yes.
Getting right. Thank you.
I did notice though that the most recent Oreo tasting was for all ages, where the last one was just for kids, and I was really excited about that, and then but I want to do Oreo tasting. I really want to do that.
Dorothy,
I love this.
so much. One of Dorothy's science experiments in school that was
Okay.
like or
Just, yeah.
okay. Milk, just sort of
Thank you.
with like, you know, water.
How come it
versus
doesn't remember?
2% versus like added, so it's less made. So now.
Something. Yes. Okay. I'm a. Thanks for that. Sorry, yeah. Good, this is what I'll do. I guess we're doing it. And then what? I've known. Calling the meeting to order. 6:06. We'll do a roll call, going around starting with myself. President Pryor in attendance. Vice President, Darrell Boss.
Trustee Dallas, Vice President of Audit and Finance.
Trustee Masinsky. Trustee Broshinsky.
Trustee Paige Barnum, Secretary.
Trustee Robinson.
Thank you. Do we have any public comment? We'll go right to Audit and Finance Committee's report.
Thank you very much. We met and I sent out an overview of the budget. I first want to compliment the APL staff for preparing a very concise, clean budget report for us and budget with explanation. Notice that I don't know how you did in a one page, but congratulations. The support and revenue and the expenditures with explanations per line to make it transparent and clear. We met and we approved. We met and the Audit and Finance Committee approved a draft budget for your review and looking at it today. I'd like to just mention that one thing did change from when the trustee Brzezinski, Barnum and I met with Adam and Andrea. Please note how many pages? Since we met on January 29th, the staff discovered a variance in the pilot payments that required a revision of 2 lines. The pilot payment line and the total fund balance used line. There is no change in the budget or the budget ask as formally recommended by us back then. I am asking that you approve this variance, or we'll talk about it today during the committee report before new business. And there is a revised fiscal year 25 budget attached with changes highlighted, which are those 2 lines that I mentioned. Line SR3, which is pilot payments, and SR10, fund balance used. I would also, well, maybe I'll mention it today. The ask going to the budget vote is a 2% increase. Am I correct in that? Which is under the tax cap rules. And for a home worth $200,000 or assessed at $200,000, the impact would be $7.32 for the year.
And the increases in reflected in the why.
We're going to be leading the board through all the budget lines that are changing when we get to the FY25 budget proposal under new business. So you'll hear a lot more detail at that.
Thank you, Trustee Dallas. Any questions? All right, we'll move on to, there's no unfinished business. On to new business, the election notice with nomination committee.
Thank you. So we do have a sign-up sheet going around if any of the trustees would like to join us in the information sessions for potential candidates. As you know, many of us as we could get would be great. And I'll share the resolution in a moment. but I want to highlight that the current sticking point before we announce the election is identifying the dates for those information sessions. So once we have that, we will be able to fully go forward and start the election. So, I am going to, I think
You need to-
as representative of the nominating committee, I can make this notion. I'm reading because it's not. At a duly called meeting of the Board of Trustees held on February 27th, I, trustee Masinsky, am making a motion that pursuant to section 260 of the education law, the executive director of the Albany Public Library is directed to notify the clerk of the city school district of Albany that the Albany Library intends to hold an election to fill 3 vacancies on the Board of Trustees of the Albany Public Library during the May 21st, 2024 annual school district meeting. And further resolved that the 2 candidates who receive the highest total number of votes cast in their favor shall each fill a 5-year term ending in 2029, created by the expiration of a current trustee's term. And the candidate who receives the 3rd highest number of votes cast in her favor shall fill a vacancy for the balance of the unexpired term ending in 2025, created by the resignation of former trustee Thomas McCarthy. And it is further resolved that pursuant to section 620 of the education law, nominating petitions for the election must be filed with the district clerk on or before 5 p.m. on May 1st, 2024.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I actually have one question on the part of the resolution, the 3rd paragraph where it says highest number of votes cast in his or her favor. Would we be amenable to amending that language to be gender neutral, as I believe New York State formally recognizes, like on driver's license, tax for gender identity?
I actually thought about that while I was reading it too. I certainly would be.
You changed it from he or her to, well, in the reading is there, but you didn't say there. So I'm saying that she just changed it. It's there, general neutral.
Yes, it is. I think
That's
the
what it
difference is that trustee Masinsky was reading from the resolution that's attached in board docs, and you were seeing the resolution or the motion language that was written in the board docs paragraph there. So
Board docs, it says there. Yeah,
in board docs,
It's
in the
there.
resolution itself, it says there.
yes. And the motion to
Right,
approve.
the motion, yeah, the motion language does say there, but if you open up the document, the PDF of the actual resolution, it still has the language.
I thought she said she was making a motion.
Yes, but trustee Masinsky was reading the entire resolution in the PDF. The
Right.
motion language is actually in
Yes, it's
board
there.
docs under where it says action.
I apologize.
That's okay. I mean, you gave the audience more than they were expecting, but the motion language is right next to where it says recommended action
Gotcha.
in board docs.
You need a second?
Yes. Thank you. All in favor or any discussion, other discussion?
Because I am planning to run for a full term, do I need to abstain from voting in this?
That's a good question, and our counsel hasn't joined the meeting yet, so we'll have to hold that question until he arrives. I don't think it matters. Like, it doesn't change, ultimately, it doesn't change the fact that the board still needs those 3 seats filled. So I don't think it's really a conflict of interest for you. You're just, in fact, if you were one of only 5 here, it would be your vote that would, help the board move on with its business. So I think it's fine.
I will wait until our council joins us, but as Andrea said, I don't think it's relevant that it matters.
Just abstain,
Putting the.
to be safe. You can just abstain and be safe, so we don't have to.
Yeah, so you can just abstain to be safe. Okay, any further discussion? All in favor? Trustee Robinson?
Hi, I'm sorry. I'm talking. I'm on mute.
All right, thank you. Resolution passes. Thank you. Moving on to budget proposal.
Okay. So I would direct your attention to the first document in board docs, the PDF that's titled FY25 budget proposal _codes year-over-year changes, or YOY changes. That will show you on page 3 the comparison between last year's budget request and this year's budget request, which is probably the most helpful page as we go through what we're looking for in the fiscal 25 budget. And I want to thank Adam Stump for helping prepare both the budget and the memo document that's now available to you in board docs as well. I suggest you stay on the page 3 of the budget proposal, because as I take you through it, it'll be a little bit easier to see what we're talking about if you're looking at that page. So the memo that's also in board docs is meant to kind of illuminate some of the highlights of the FY25 budget proposal document. So as Trustee Dallas alluded to earlier, and as the Audit and Finance Committee presented in the last meeting's committee minutes, we are looking for a 2% increase to the operating tax levy, which would be a total of $154,211 over FY24. And that increase, as Trustee Dallas mentioned, is under the tax cap. So that's the sort of critical line that is near the top of the document. Under other revenue, I do want to call out a couple of things. Our pilot payments, as Trustee Dallas mentioned earlier, were significantly less than what we had expected by over $85,000. And those payments are out of our control. They're payments that come through the school district and are then passed on to us, I believe. So there are a couple of properties that did not issue payments. So that is what majorly affected the projected use of fund balance for fiscal 25. I also want to point out that the fees and sales and interest income have both performed really well in fiscal 24, due in part to our healthy CDTA Navigator Pass sales and due to favorable overall market trends, respectively. So for the same reason that our if we have any investments going on, they're looking better in our personal lives, that's true for the library too. So we have increased those lines by a total of $65,000 to reflect those trends. As I said, the fund balance is what's going to be mainly impacted, the projected use of fund balance, given that we are asking for this rather modest increase of 2%. That doesn't make up the entire amount that we're going to need to see in the budget in order to have enough to support all of our operations in fiscal 25. So we're projecting that we'll need about $561,186 in fund balance. Any questions so far on fund balance or fund balance use before we move on? Okay. Under the expenditures section, excuse me, there is an increase in payroll and related costs that's being recommended on the order of 6.52% over fiscal 24. And there are a few reasons for that. One is the CSEA contractual increase for all of the staff who are eligible for that 2.5% raise in fiscal 25. We are also proposing to add a part-time library assistant for youth services at Arbor Hill West Hill. This is to basically address a deficiency at Arbor Hill West Hill. We have staff at all of our other branches whose staff hours are assigned to supporting youth services, and this is something that, for whatever reason, didn't exist. So the support for youth services at Arbor Hill West Hill has been provided by librarian ones and by library assistants who weren't necessarily trained in youth services or dedicated to youth services in their studies. So what we're looking for is a library assistant for youth services specifically, so that we can grow new audiences at Arbor Hill West Hill and support the interest that we see there in, youth activities. The increase in payroll taxes and processing fees corresponds with the cost of our staffing model. So that's basically like a commensurate increase that makes it possible to process all the payroll for all of the people on our payroll and address the payroll taxes. And the New York State retirement bill estimate that was provided was over 70,000 higher than last year's estimate. So that estimate, of course, is determined by the retirement system of New York State. Any questions on the payroll and related costs increase? Details there?
Well, was it PR4 payroll taxes and processing fees? The difference, I'm seeing zero, so there wasn't any increases in that, on that line in payroll taxes and processing fees?
That's actually the next line down, PR5.
Wasn't any difference.
That was employee benefits. PR4, no, that's fine. There's a lot of numbers on this page.
And there wasn't any increase.
Yeah. So moving on to occupancy costs. And this is kind of in the good news column. We're looking at a 6.73% decrease from fiscal 24, and that is pretty much down to the savings that we've seen in LED lighting and the electricity savings related to those new lights. So what we have reduced this budget by is actually pretty conservative. We don't know yet how the first year of LED lights is going to play out in terms of our electricity costs, but based on the data we have so far, this is looking like a very like a good guess on the conservative side. So it may be that we see more savings than we expect. That would be great, but this is what we can plan for at this point, knowing what we know now. Under materials and services, that's a line that that we are also making some adjustments to. We're looking for a 2.19% increase over fiscal 24. As you heard from the collection management services head, Stephanie Anderson, who visited the board earlier this year, the demand for digital content has increased significantly in the library, and that's true for libraries all over the country. Since the pandemic, a lot of people have discovered digital content. It's very popular. It's very difficult to meet that demand. I'm not sure it's possible to meet the demand, but every increase helps. And so we are recommending a $20,000 increase to that particular line for digital content. The way that we are paying for that increase essentially is by using some or reassigning some of the materials funds from the books and AV materials line. We've seen a lot of change in the way that AV materials are being used in the library. Music CDs, books on CD doesn't really get much use anymore. The ways that cars have been built without CD players, all of these factors have contributed to the changes that we've seen in patron behavior toward AV materials. So we can comfortably reduce that line by $10,000 without seeing any pain points in our physical materials, which we know are cherished and well used by many patrons. So no hit to the number of children's books we buy in a year or anything like that. This is really more about the AV side and the dips that we're seeing in particularly adult AV use and kids AV use of CCD. The cost of periodicals has also risen, and so we need to raise that budget by $3,000. And we also have added $5,000 to the programming and community engagement line. That's actually the technical title of that line is now programming, community relations, and engagement. And as you all know, within the last year, we made some real investments in personnel in both creating the community engagement department with a department head and a part-time LA to come. We also enhanced the programs and partnerships department with 2 new librarians who actually just started last week. One librarian for adult services and adult services outreach, and one for youth services. And they're both now reporting up to the head of programs and partnerships. So adding $5,000 to that particular line will really help us address the increased outreach costs that are related to staffing those departments. And that's not just office supplies, that's stuff like equipment that they want to take out on the road, so to speak. So like the wagons that they need to take to community fairs, the all the various sundry items that help support our outreach efforts. Potentially some new giveaway materials or additional program guides. So we're not quite sure what that cost is going to look like yet, but we thought $5,000 was a good place to start. And we can always address that in the modification for next year if we need to. Under administrative and miscellaneous, the next section, well, first I want to pause. I've been pausing at each section. So any questions or comments on the materials and services changes? Under administrative miscellaneous, we're looking at a 5.62% decrease from fiscal 24, and that has to do with 2 main factors. The tax cert payment line, we can comfortably reduce by 50%, knowing how it's been trending for the last several years. We've seen annual expenditures exceed 100,000 in the past, but in the last few years, we've seen minimal expenses. And Adam can tell you more about the tax cert payment line if you have any questions about that. But we've seen it trending down to the degree that we're comfortable dropping that assigned budget down to 50,000. Also, our annual liability insurance premiums have increased steadily, so we've increased that line by 10,000 to account for that. And any questions on the administrative and miscellaneous? Finally, information technology is sort of a non-story here. We're seeing basically a level funded budget for technology. We don't have any major potential for cost reductions and no major needs for additional funding were identified. So you might remember we do have a major switch problem. Project. It's not a problem. It's a problem, but we're fixing it. We applied for the capital funds from the board to address the switch replacement project, and that's underway now. So that funding that's not part of the IT budget. That's the capital that was assigned to address the switch replacement. So that's the big action going on in IT. So in summary, our proposed budget is 3.48% greater than the fiscal 24 budget. And we are also proposing this sort of modest 2% operating tax levy increase. But this is the most responsive and responsible strategy that we have to address the growing costs without putting a huge, without actually running into the risk of overriding or overstepping the tax cap. If we were to push that recommendation higher, I guess we could run into an issue where the pilot payments that come in are greater than we think they're going to be all of a sudden, or there could be variables that suddenly put us over the tax cap, which would not be which would be a difficult situation to deal with. And Adam can speak more to that if you have questions about that. But we will also be looking toward the mid-year modification to help address any major variances that come up over the course of the year. So that is the whole deal. But of course, if you have questions about any other lines that I haven't spoken to or that we haven't addressed that you have questions about, happy to answer your questions.
Questions? But to my understanding, we don't have to make a decision, vote now. We can, there's no action that needs to be taken at this time. We can look it over and review it and then discussion. Our decision and make a vote. Thank you. Very thorough. Thank you, Adam and Sean.
Yes, thank you guys for all your work on this.
Thank you. And of course, if you have questions that come up between now and the March 12th meeting, feel free to contact me by email, phone, any means that you wish to ask anything you want to ask about the budget, because I would love the chance to put together a good response for you between now and the March meeting when the vote has to happen. Thank you. Council has joined, so if we wanted to revisit that.
I think we have to because we voted and she abstained.
Right.
Thank you. And the memo is attached for your review. All right, so moving on to public comment. Do we have any public comment? Okay, just checking. There no need to go into executive session. Make a motion to adjourn. Trustee Dallas.
I make a motion to adjourn.
All in-
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you so much. Beat my last record.
Thanks, everybody.
A lot.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. The nominating committee as well. Thank you.
Yeah, I
Look forward to
we can
get out
Reach
the
out.
word.
different folks with this extra time. Fingers crossed.
Thank you. I will be putting it in my network.
Thank you for making all of this budget stuff